Mind if I
Soren
join you?
Whitaker had a
You look
rule
really
about Kieran
focused.
Ashford.
Oh,
Don't fall
not
in
at
love
all.
with him.
Go ahead.
It was a reasonable rule. Kieran was everything
And if we
Soren
apply the
wasn't.
substitution
He was
method
confident
here,
where
the
Soren was
integral becomes
reserved,
much simpler to
effortlessly
solve.
popular, where
See?
Soren preferred the quiet corner of the library, and wealthy enough that he never had to calculate whether he could afford dinner after paying tuition. Soren was a scholarship student at an elite Boston university. He had one goal: graduate, find a stable job, take care of his younger sister, and never depend on anyone. Then Kieran took the empty seat beside him. "You're Soren, right?" Soren glanced up. "Yes." "Kieran, I know." Kieran laughed. That sounded terrifyingly confident. Soren returned to his notes. "I've heard people mention you. Good things?" "Mostly." "Mostly?" Soren smiled. "Ask me after the semester." Kieran laughed again. That was how it started. Nothing dramatic. No instant confession. Just a seat beside him. Then came the coffee. Soren stayed late one night preparing for an exam. At midnight, Kieran placed a cup beside his laptop. "You look like you're about to collapse." Soren looked at the cup. "How much?" "It's coffee. I mean, how much do I owe you?" Kieran frowned. "Nothing. I can pay." "I know." "Then why won't you let me?" Kieran shrugged. "Because I wanted to buy you coffee." Soren didn't know why those words stayed with him. After that, Kieran began appearing everywhere. He shared notes when Soren missed class, saved the chair beside him, walked him home when Boston snow turned the sidewalks white. Sometimes they studied until 2 in the morning, talking about everything except the things that actually mattered. And Soren began noticing things he shouldn't. The way Kieran rubbed his neck when nervous. The quiet smile he tried to hide when Soren made sarcastic comments. The way his voice softened whenever he said Soren's name. Then Soren saw Kieran's girlfriend waiting outside the lecture hall. Reality returned immediately. Kieran wasn't his, so Soren buried the feelings. He told himself friendship was enough. Until one night, Kieran looked across the library table and asked, "Why do you always look at me like you're about to say something?" Soren's heart stopped. He forced a laugh. "Maybe someday I will." Kieran smiled. "I'll wait." Soren looked down at his books. He didn't know it yet, but that simple promise would eventually change both their lives. Because the boy Soren was trying desperately not to love, was already becoming the person he couldn't imagine losing. Kieran had never realized how much of his life depended on Soren being nearby. Then, Soren stopped being nearby. The change was almost ridiculous. The library felt too quiet. The coffee shop felt too crowded. And every time Kieran walked into class, his eyes automatically searched for the empty chair beside him. He told himself he was only worried about their friendship. He didn't believe himself anymore. So he started looking for Soren. At the library, at the campus cafe, outside the economics building, even at the gym, where Kieran had absolutely no reason to be. One afternoon, Soren caught him waiting outside the cafe. He raised an eyebrow. "Are you stalking me?" Kieran smiled. "Maybe." Soren laughed. "That's concerning. I wanted to see you." The smile disappeared from Soren's face. "Why?" Kieran didn't have an answer. That was becoming a problem. He knew he missed Soren. He just didn't understand why. Soren refused to make it easy. He was polite, friendly, but different. He no longer waited for Kieran after class. He no longer sent messages late at night. And he had started applying to graduate programs across the country. When Kieran saw the list, his stomach dropped. "You're really leaving?" Soren looked up. "That's the plan. But Boston is your home." It was. Kieran didn't know what to say. Then came the spring festival. Music filled the campus courtyard. Soren was laughing with another alpha. Kieran watched from across the crowd. Something sharp twisted inside him. When the alpha placed a hand lightly against Soren's shoulder, Kieran immediately walked over. "Soren, can we talk?" Outside, the music became distant. Soren crossed his arms. "What?" Kieran hesitated. I don't like seeing you with him. Soren stared. Why? I don't know. Then figure it out. Kieran looked away. Soren's voice softened. You rejected me, Kieran. You don't get to be jealous because I decided to move on. I know. Do you? Kieran finally looked at him. I think I made a mistake. Soren's expression didn't change. No. Kieran frowned. You made a choice. Soren stepped backward. And now you're uncomfortable, because I'm making mine. Kieran stood frozen. For the first time, he understood. Soren wasn't chasing him anymore. He was walking away, and Kieran was the one desperately trying to follow. Kieran had spent years becoming the person everyone expected him to be. Perfect grades, perfect manners, perfect family, perfect future. His father had already decided what that future looked like. Kieran would graduate, join the Ashford Company, marry a suitable Omega woman, and eventually take over the family business. There was no room for uncertainty, especially not the kind of uncertainty that had Soren's face appearing in his thoughts every night. So when Soren finally asked him what was really happening, Kieran stopped running. They sat beneath an old tree behind the university library. I wasn't honest with you, Kieran said. Soren looked at him. About what? My relationship. Kieran took a breath. My ex didn't leave because we stopped getting along. Soren waited. She discovered I was questioning my sexuality. His voice became quieter. I was terrified. Soren didn't interrupt. Kieran continued. My family has always talked about my future like it belongs to them. My father expects me to marry an Omega woman. My mother already has families she wants me to meet. And when you told me you liked me, he looked down. I panicked. Soren's expression softened, but he didn't reach for him. Because you didn't feel anything? Kieran shook his head. Because I felt too much. Silence. Soren looked away. Then why did you reject me? Because I was afraid. Of me? No. Kieran looked directly at him. Of what loving you would mean. Soren swallowed. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Soren said quietly, You don't get to make me your hiding place. Kieran nodded. I know. I won't be someone's secret. No, I don't want you to be. Then what do you want? Kieran hesitated. I want to understand myself. Soren studied him. And after that? Kieran's voice was barely audible. I want to choose you when I'm not afraid. Soren's heart tightened, but he refused to let hope make the decision for him. Then take your time. Kieran looked surprised. But don't ask me to wait forever. I won't. Soren stood. He walked away slowly. Kieran watched him disappear between the trees. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about what his family would say. He wasn't thinking about his reputation. He wasn't even thinking about losing his inheritance. He was thinking about the one person who had loved him honestly and refused to become a secret just to keep him. Kieran finally understood something. If he wanted Soren, he couldn't simply confess his feelings. He had to become brave enough to live them. Kieran thought telling the truth would make things easier. It didn't. His family found out 2 weeks later. His father called him into the study the moment he returned home. On the desk was a photograph of Kieran and Soren leaving the university together. You will end this. Kieran stared at him. No. His father's expression hardened. You don't understand what you're risking. I understand perfectly. Your inheritance. I can live without it. Your position in this family. I don't need it. His mother entered quietly. Kieran, this isn't about money. Then what is it about? She looked at him sadly. Your future. Kieran almost laughed. You mean the future you planned for me? Nobody answered. His father pushed another document across the desk. A marriage proposal. Kieran didn't even look at it. I'm not doing this. You'll reconsider. I won't. His father stood. If you choose him, you're choosing to leave this family. Kieran's heart pounded. For the first time, the threat felt real. But when he imagined walking away from Soren, something inside him hurt more than losing his inheritance ever could. Still, fear returned. Over the next few days, Kieran became distant. Soren noticed immediately. They were sitting together after class when Soren finally asked, "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Kieran." He sighed. "My family knows." Soren went still. "And they're not happy. What are you going to do?" Kieran didn't answer quickly enough. Soren understood. His heart sank. "You're thinking about giving in. I'm trying to figure things out. I know." Soren closed his laptop. "I've spent too much time waiting for you." Kieran reached for his hand. "Don't." Soren gently pulled away. "I'm leaving Boston." Kieran froze. "What?" "I accepted a graduate program." "When?" "Yesterday." "Why didn't you tell me?" Soren looked at him. "Because I knew you'd ask me to stay." Kieran's voice broke. "Please don't." Soren stood. "I love you." Kieran stared at him. "But I won't build my life around someone who isn't sure I'm worth choosing." He picked up his bag. Kieran caught his wrist. "Don't go." Soren looked at his hand, then at him. "You said you wanted to choose me when you weren't afraid." Kieran's eyes filled with tears. "I do." "Then prove it." Soren gently freed himself. The next morning, Kieran made his decision. He walked into the university auditorium. His family was sitting in the front row. Soren was there too. And when Kieran stepped onto the stage, he knew there was no way to hide anymore. The auditorium was packed. Professors filled the front rows. Students whispered among themselves. Kieran's parents sat near the center, watching him with expressions he couldn't read. And somewhere near the back, Soren was preparing to leave. Kieran had one chance. He stepped toward the microphone. "Before I begin, there's something I need to say." The room quieted. His father frowned. Kieran looked toward Soren. "I spent most of my life believing my future had already been decided." A few students exchanged confused glances. My family had plans for me. My university had expectations. Even I had expectations for myself. He paused, and I was afraid. His father's expression hardened. Kieran continued. "I was afraid of disappointing people, afraid of being different, afraid of admitting that the person I loved wasn't the person everyone expected me to love." Soren's breath caught. Kieran looked directly at him. "His name is Soren Whitaker." The auditorium erupted into whispers. Soren stood frozen. Kieran stepped away from the podium. "I spent months pretending I didn't know what I felt. I rejected him because I was scared. I thought that would make everything easier." His voice shook. It didn't. Kieran walked down the steps. His father stood. "Kieran." Kieran stopped. For a second, the entire room waited. Then Kieran turned back. "I'm sorry." His father stared. Kieran's voice remained calm. "But I'm not changing my decision." He continued toward Soren. Soren's eyes filled with tears. When Kieran reached him, he stopped a few feet away. "I don't expect you to forgive me immediately. I don't expect you to trust me immediately. And I don't expect you to forget how long I made you wait," Soren whispered. "Then why are you doing this?" Kieran looked at him. "Because I'm choosing you." Soren's lips trembled. Now, in front of everyone, especially in front of everyone." Kieran extended his hand. Soren stared at it. For months, Soren had chased Kieran. He had confessed, waited, hoped, then finally walked away. Now Kieran was the one standing in front of everyone, asking him to stay. Soren slowly placed his hand in Kieran's. The room erupted in applause. Kieran's family remained silent, but Kieran didn't look at them. He only looked at Soren, and Soren finally understood something. He hadn't wasted those months loving Kieran, but he also hadn't been wrong to walk away. Sometimes you have to stop chasing someone, so they can finally realize they want to catch you. Kieran squeezed his hand. "I know I'm late." Soren laughed through his tears. "Very late." Kieran smiled. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it." Choosing Soren publicly had been the easy part. Learning how to love him properly was harder. For the first few weeks, everything felt perfect. Kieran walked Soren to class. They studied together. They ate dinner after lectures. And for the first time, Kieran could hold Soren's hand without checking who was watching. But happiness didn't erase fear. One night, Soren found Kieran staring at his phone. His father's name was on the screen. "You should answer." Kieran locked the screen. "I don't want to." "Why?" "He wants me to come home." Soren sat beside him. "What did he say?" "He said he'll forgive me if I end this." Soren's heart sank. "And what did you tell him?" "Nothing." Soren looked away. The silence became uncomfortable. Finally, he whispered, "What if one day you regret choosing me?" Kieran turned toward him. "Why would I?" "Because your life would have been easier." Kieran shook his head. "Easy isn't the same as right." Soren looked at him. "You lost your family because of me." "No." Kieran took his hand. "I made a decision. But don't take responsibility for a choice I made." Soren's eyes softened. Kieran continued, "I spent years trying to become someone my family would approve of. I'm done." Still, the pressure didn't disappear. Kieran's father stopped supporting him financially. His mother refused to attend university events. Friends who had once surrounded Kieran began disappearing. For the first time, he had to build a life without his family's money. He struggled. Soren noticed, but he never tried to rescue him. Instead, he said, "You can do this." Kieran eventually began therapy. He learned how much of his fear came from years of trying to earn approval. Soren continued his own studies. They didn't become inseparable. They became something healthier. Two people with separate ambitions who chose to walk beside each other. After graduation, Kieran accepted a position at the Ashford Company, but only after negotiating independence from his father's control. Soren received a research fellowship across the country. For the first time, distance threatened them. Kieran looked at the acceptance letter. "You should go." Soren stared. "You mean that?" "Absolutely." "You won't ask me to stay?" Kieran smiled. "No." He took Soren's hand. "I don't want you beside me, because you're afraid I'll leave." He squeezed his fingers. "I want you beside me, because you want to be." Soren smiled. Years earlier, he had thought love meant chasing someone until they finally chose him. Now he understood. Love wasn't convincing someone to stay. It was trusting them enough to let them choose. And when Kieran looked at him that night, Soren knew he wasn't staying, because he had nowhere else to go. He was staying because he had finally found somewhere he wanted to be. Graduation day arrived faster than either of them expected. The campus was crowded with families, photographs, flowers, and people making promises about futures they couldn't predict. Soren stood beneath the old oak tree behind the library. The same place where Kieran had once admitted he was afraid. "You disappeared." Soren turned. Kieran stood behind him, holding 2 coffees. Soren smiled. "You still remember my order?" "Of course." Kieran handed him one. "Some things are permanent." Soren took it. "You've changed." "So have you." Kieran leaned against the tree. "I used to think loving you meant losing everything. And now, I realized I was only losing the version of myself everyone else wanted." Soren looked at him quietly. Kieran had changed. Not because he had rejected his family completely. He had simply stopped allowing their expectations to control him. He had started therapy, built his own financial independence, set boundaries with his parents, and learned to speak honestly when something frightened him. Soren was proud of him. But pride wasn't the same as surrender. Kieran seemed to understand that. He reached into his jacket. Soren frowned. "What is that?" Kieran pulled out a small box. Soren's eyes widened. "No." Kieran laughed. "You haven't even seen it. I know where this is going. Hopefully." He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. Soren stared. "Kieran, I know we're young. I know we have careers to build. And I know you don't want promises that sound like cages." He stepped closer. "So this isn't one." Soren looked at him. "What is it?" "A promise that I'll keep choosing you." Kieran took his hand. "Not because I need you. Not because my family rejected me. Not because I'm afraid of being alone. Because when I imagine my future, he smiled. You're in it. Soren's eyes filled with tears. You finally learned how to say the right things. I'm still practicing. Soren laughed. Then he closed the box. Ask me properly. Kieran blinked. Now? Now. Kieran dropped to one knee. Soren covered his mouth, laughing through his tears. Soren Whitaker. He looked up. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that choosing you was never a mistake? Soren extended his hand. Yes. Kieran slipped the ring onto his finger. Then Soren pulled him up and kissed him. Years ago, Soren had chased Kieran because he was afraid love would disappear if he stopped reaching for it. Now he understood something completely different. Love wasn't about holding tighter. It was about giving someone the freedom to stay and discovering that they stayed anyway. Kieran wrapped his arms around him. I love you. Soren smiled against his shoulder. I know. Then he whispered, but I love you too. And this time, neither of them was afraid of what came next. Years later, Soren returned to Boston for the university's alumni celebration. He walked through the familiar campus slowly. The library was still there. The coffee shop still smelled like roasted beans. Even the old oak tree stood exactly where he'd left it. Soren smiled. So much had changed. Yet somehow, everything had started here. You still come here when you're thinking too much. Soren turned. Kieran stood behind him, older now, more confident, still carrying that same smile. Soren laughed. You're stalking me again. Maybe. They walked together toward the library. After a moment, Kieran said, Do you remember the first time you confessed? Soren groaned. Unfortunately, I was an idiot. You were terrified. I was both. Soren smiled. You really didn't know. Kieran shook his head. I knew you mattered. I just didn't understand why losing you scared me so much. They stopped beneath the old tree. Kieran looked at him. I wish I'd understood sooner. Soren was quiet. Maybe you needed time. Maybe. Kieran took his hand. But you shouldn't have had to chase me that long. Soren smiled. I stopped chasing you. I know. That's when you started following me. Kieran laughed. Best decision I ever made. Soren leaned against his shoulder. For years, he had believed love meant proving himself worthy of being chosen. He thought if he loved Kieran enough, waited long enough, and stayed close enough, eventually, Kieran would realize what they could become. But he had learned something more important. You cannot force someone to choose you. You cannot love someone into readiness. And you cannot build a healthy relationship by abandoning yourself. Kieran had needed to make his own choice. Not because Soren pressured him. Not because his family rejected him. Not because he was afraid of being alone. He chose Soren because, after all the fear disappeared, Soren was still the person he wanted beside him. Kieran squeezed his hand. Do you ever regret chasing me? Soren smiled. Sometimes. Kieran laughed. That's cruel. But I don't regret loving you. His expression softened. And I definitely don't regret stopping. Kieran pulled him closer. Why? Because that's when you finally started running toward me. Kieran kissed his forehead. I'll keep running. Soren smiled. Good. They walked away beneath the evening lights, hand in hand. The boy who once chased love had finally learned to let it choose him back. And the alpha, who had once been too afraid to admit what he wanted, had finally understood the simplest truth of all. Soren wasn't someone he had been pushed into loving. He was the person he freely chose.